Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to New Wave Global. I am Asad Ejaz Butt. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined by Dr. Huma Baqai today to speak about what happened recently in the US when the Ukrainian leader Zelensky was visiting. As we all saw, a spat on live television, which President Trump himself said that it's good nighttime television, and a disgraceful event that left the global foreign policy analysts, the pundits, the experts, in a state of confusion, really, on what to believe and what is going to happen in the future. These are uncertain times, not just in the US, but elsewhere in the world. To speak about this issue, I have Dr. Huma Baqai, who's a renowned foreign policy analyst in Pakistan, also does like a lot of work on international relations. Our roundup would include talking to Dr. Baqai on why Trump and Vance treated Zelensky the way he was treated. What is the background? How is Russia going to react? And what is the sentiment in Europe right now? We'd also try to touch upon the impacts on Pakistan, perhaps. As we know, before the vote of no confidence, Pakistan's previous Prime Minister Imran Khan visited Russia, and the same US at that time created like a big roar out of Pakistan's prime minister going to Russia. But the same Americans are now sort of reprimanding the Ukrainian prime minister in their own land. So I think that should be included in the roundup. Let's welcome Dr. Huma Baqai. Thank you, madam, for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Uh, so if you're ready, I'll shoot my first question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what do you think is the background? Do you think it's just a change in government in the US, or perhaps some particular background that we don't know about? Why was Zelensky treated the way he was treated in the US?
Well, this is definitely what Trumpism is all about. This is not the first time that Oval Office witnessed a tough meeting or a meeting where a head of the state was dressed down, but
Hmm.
it was never done in public.
Hmm.
And it was never done for the entire world to view the humiliation.
Right.
So I think it was against all norms of diplomacy, and it was definitely in bad taste. Did it achieve what Trump wanted to achieve? I think it backfired in some ways because it is break. I mean, the West is fractured when you talk about West with the United States and Europe. Yes, the fractures are very, very obvious. But this particular meeting also brought Europe together.
Hmm.
So they are now, so Germany has a plan. UK was very welcoming of Zelensky.
Hmm.
France also visited Trump. His meeting was more French. So what I mean to say is that Zelensky came across as a man for his country,
Hmm.
and Trump came across as someone drunk with power. And the optics were not good. How will it play out? Let's see that, because I was only reading yesterday that Trump enjoys controlled chaos.
Hmm.
He enjoys the swing model. So he will take an extreme position,
Hmm.
and everybody will get flustered because it is coming from the most powerful man on the face of earth. And then he will retreat to get to a middle ground. He's done the same in the Middle East. Uh, you know how conveniently the fact that he had a direct conversation with Hamas
Hmm.
was not projected the way it should have been, because US, as per its constitution, I think does not speak directly
Hmm.
to terror organizations. So he's non-traditional, yes. He's transactional, yes. He easily is also very pragmatic, so he also backtracks. It was first the Palestinians should leave Gaza, then it was Hamas should leave Gaza, then it was, if you don't give up the hostages, it is bad news for you. So
Hmm.
yes, and yes, there is constantly an element of threat in his conversations,
Hmm.
and also this arrogance of power,
Hmm.
which is not how US used to work. I know that US has been playing with its hard power for some time now since it's
Hmm.
invaded a couple of countries.
Hmm.
But largely, it also kept the semblance of soft power being important to
Hmm.
how diplomacy was carried out. Somehow, Trump has completely given up on that, and so has his cabinet.
Do you really think that I totally understand the kind of foreign policy that Trump is now building, based on a lot of hard power, as you call it, the Trumpian arrogance. But do you think that his belief that the US was taken for granted for many, many years by the international community through, the US aid grants, perhaps on agreements in which the US was contributing on these international organizations or treaties, perhaps that he's now, or international commitments that he's now reneging on. Do you think that the US was really taken for granted by these international organizations or perhaps countries like Ukraine?
I don't think US was ever taken for granted.
Hmm.
We've had some detailed documentaries and papers that have come out on US aid. And
Hmm.
we know that the capitalist aid was never without strings.
Hmm.
There were no free lunches. So the country that was the largest recipient of American Fulbright program was perhaps Egypt.
Hmm.
Egypt did its share of payback. Pakistan was the second largest recipient of Fulbright scholarships.
Hmm.
Pakistan paid back with whatever it could. Pakistan paid back with the fabric of its society. Pakistan paid back with a lot more than it could really handle. So to assume that US was doing this entirely out of goodwill is perhaps just exaggerating the whole thing. And the other dimension of how it was misused,
Hmm.
well, then you should move towards improving the governance rather than shutting it down.
Hmm.
You're not improving the governance of the system. You're saying we're not going to do it anymore. So if there's governance issues, perhaps those should be addressed rather than completely shutting it down.
Hmm. And and just now going towards the Zelenskyan side of things, how do you debug that? Do you think that, as Vance and Trump said, was he being disrespectful? Did he come with an agenda that the Europeans had fed him with? Do you think that the idea was to sort of make some money out of war, as Trump and his team probably painted it to be? Was he not really interested in ceasefire?
Well, you see, we all know Budapest happened.
Yeah.
We all know US made certain commitments.
Hmm.
And usually it did not make much of a difference if it was the Republicans or the Democrats.
Hmm.
The commitments continued. Trump has chosen to upend everything.
Yeah.
He thinks the withdrawal from Afghanistan was wrong and flawed. He's going full throttle on protectionism in the US
Hmm.
on the economic front. He is literally fracturing the partnership with Europe. Not fracturing, I think just it's already fractured. He's now all set for a clean breakup. He's been against NATO from day one.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, he's seen someone as who's the biggest supporter of Putin's point of view.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, so it's interesting that two speeches happened an hour apart from each other. One
Hmm.
was Trump's and one was President Xi's.
Hmm.
One person said, this is the Chinese premier. One
Hmm.
person said that we want to make America great by shutting down America, by being a protectionist state. And the other person, who's supposed to be the one for protectionism, spoke about free trade and opening up and uh, making the world a better place. All these were American slogans. All these were Western narratives. All of a sudden, they're coming from the wrong quarters. So the world is upended in some ways. As for Europe, as for the Ukrainian war, this was in some ways expected because during his campaign, he said that is one war that he's going to bring to an end. He said he's going to bring all wars to an end, but the obvious came out that has been he's using his strong arm to bring the Ukrainian war to an end, but at the same time, he funds the Israeli armament and he continues to threat. And these two conflicts are uh, are interesting because what they accuse Russia of, they support Israel with. How blue-eyed Afghan child as a refugee didn't matter, but a blue-eyed Ukrainian child broke everybody's heart. And so the dichotomies were there. But Trump has somehow now been very open about it. So I'm going to support Russia and upend the entire situation in Europe, where whatever happened with Ukraine, despite the commitments we made, doesn't matter. And this war should not have happened. And it was Europe's mistake to bring NATO to Russia's doorstep. That's Putin's point of view, 200%. I'm not even going into what's right or what's wrong. Actually, it was provocation from the European side, if you see it from an objective point of view. But at the end of the day, it was because of Budapest, it was because of the promises they had made. It was also because how they nudged along Ukraine to carry on with this conflict. This conflict was not possible without American air support, American intelligence, European support, European arms, all of that. Zelensky on his own could have never done it. Trump is absolutely right. This would have ended in 2 weeks, perhaps 3 days. The fact that it carried on it is now a longer conflict than the Middle Eastern conflict that started earlier on. So you see, so there are no norms, there are no laws, there are no values. It is what the whimsical kitchen cabinet of Trump thinks is right, is becoming the foreign policy of America. So when people say that America did this, I actually turn around and say, Trump did this. And because you see, there's also an internal dissent. 17 of his executive orders have been challenged in the courts.
I think
Some,
the
yes.
I think the problem with Trump is that uh, people, scholars in particular, scholars like you, find it a hard time to sort of
Very
place
hard time.
place place him within one bracket. He's not a you
Yes.
can't think that he's a liberal Democrat. He's not a
He's
Republican.
not a liberal Democrat. He's anything but that. He's not a liberal Democrat, but
He's not a Republican either.
it is very difficult
Yeah,
for scholars to swallow what US is becoming after being used to a certain
yeah.
kind of US. Will this be good for US? Will this be bad for US? I don't know. But I
Hmm.
do know that it is upending the world order. It is pushing the world towards multipolarity.
Hmm.
And just as a student of international relations, every time the world was multipolar, there was a world war.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see, so World War One, multipolar world. World War Two, multipolar world. So I don't know. Right now,
That's
there's
what.
more chaos. There's more uncertainty. There is confusion.
Hmm.
Uh, we don't know what to expect from whom. Uh, I think his larger focus is containment of China,
Hmm.
from where his engagement with Russia or his desire to engage Russia also emanates. But
Hmm.
we don't know, really. I mean, while we are talking about all of this, there is a block which is consolidating and crystallizing. The convergence between Afghanistan, China, Iran, Russia, Central Asia is real. There are talks about alternative currencies, alternative economic blocks. With what Trump is doing, will it give it a tailwind
Hmm.
that it needs, exactly the way COVID gave China's rise a tailwind? So,
That's
so,
true.
so we don't know. You're right.
Oh,
Scholars have a bird's eye view, and they're also kind of shocked because they
yeah.
don't know where to slot Trump.
I think our idea always is to place people, events into, very sort of um, properly defined theoretical frameworks. And Trump is sort of hard to place within any theoretical framework and
It's
hard to
not about
define.
theoretical, it's not about theoretical frameworks only. It's
Yeah.
about how climate is not an issue for him, how he wants to withdraw from World Trade Organization, how he doesn't give two hoots about the United Nations. So everything the world, the civil, so-called civilized world had invested in for decades is now under question. And we have the superpower who was responsible for their construct. Even the League of Nations was US idea, but it could not become a member of the United League of Nations. And then United Nations happened. And now all of this multilateralism has become a joke. Humanitarian laws in Middle East, you can't even talk about them.
But
And how will it embolden other dictators all around the world? There is Kashmir and
hmm.
there's India, and you know, leaders who actually take inspiration from what Trump is doing rather than being, scholars don't like what he's doing, but dictators are loving him.
Dr. Baqai, while I'm maybe more interested than you in bashing Trump, but I'll come back to this. My bigger interest today is to sort of debug the event more than debugging what Trump is doing, because there are a lot of talks about Trump anyway. So I'll come back to the event and Russia. So I talked to a diplomat a few days ago. His opinion was that there's like a difference between a ceasefire and a peace deal. Zelensky might take a ceasefire, but not a peace deal, because the Europeans want a ceasefire, but not a peace deal. And there's like a thin line between the two. The other thing he said was that Ukraine, this would be the status quo ante in Ukraine now, and Ukraine would be like Korea divided or Kashmir, and would this is the business as usual now in Ukraine, which would continue. Do you agree with these two opinions?
Well, I think that as an objective observer of events, I don't know if it's the peace deal or a ceasefire. It is who's going to get earth minerals from Ukraine.
Hmm.
Is it going to be the UK? Is it going to be the US? And what can Ukraine extract in lieu of them?
Hmm.
It's essentially that. There were even people who were saying that perhaps Zelensky should talk directly to Russia rather than having these two in the middle or
Hmm.
having middlemen, so to say. But of course, you do know that the Ukrainian constitution prevents Zelensky from talking directly to Russia. Russia is in the most comfortable position it
Hmm.
could
Right
possibly
now.
have been.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, he has a spokesperson in the West doing his bidding. What more could he have asked for?
Hmm.
And he's also become comfortable with the China's support.
Hmm.
He has North Korea's support. And
Hmm.
now all of a sudden, China supporting him, North Korea supporting him, and now US is supporting him. So what could have been better for the guy, you know?
No, yeah, absolutely. And what could have been better for the guy reminds me of another guy. What do you think of Starmer? What is he up to in all of this?
Well, we did hear about this deal that had already taken place between him and Zelensky
Yeah.
on earth minerals, and
Right.
it's probably on their website also.
Hmm.
And a lot of people said that there was no way Zelensky could have signed that deal in the Oval Office that day
Hmm.
because of what he had already committed to UK. So
Hmm.
I still think it's a developing story, but I also think that we're living in a very dangerous, toxic, realist world.
Yeah.
What is coming more than obvious to many is that one, there is no multilateralism. One, you're for yourself. And I don't know if it is going to increase the desire to become nuclear powers.
Hmm.
Are we pushing China against the wall to become one? He has a conciliatory tone towards China
Hmm.
because nuclear proliferation is probably at the back of his mind as well. I'm
Hmm.
talking about Trump. So essentially, we are pushing a world towards more and more states trying to, probably Pakistan must be getting a huge sigh of relief that we chose to crash the nuclear club when we did, because at least we have some balance of power. Imagine in India taking its inspiration from Israel and doing what it could do to us.
Hmm. Hmm.
You see, so it's not just us who's thinking like that. But what is Ukraine saying? I was in Kiev some years ago. I don't know if you have time for this. This is
I have
before
time.
the war.
I have time.
So
You can go
I
on.
was in the Kiev University. It was
Hmm.
a scholarly trip,
Yeah.
and all the students. It was on Pakistan-Ukraine trade ties. But
Yeah.
what the students wanted to ask me was that how did Pakistan retain its nuclear status?
Hmm.
And back then, Crimea had happened,
So this was after
and
2014, basically.
this is before this war started. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't remember what was the exact year that I was there,
So the
but
Crimean
Crimea,
annexation is 2014, so ish.
yes, so Crimea had just happened,
Okay.
and a tourist resort had turned a buffer state,
Hmm.
and the students in Ukraine were convinced that if they had not given up their nuclear capability and capacity and would have not signed the Budapest, they would have been in a better position and this aggression would not have happened. And that aggression did not stop at Crimea.
Hmm.
It is what it is today.
Hmm.
So what is the message to the world?
Hmm.
It's toxic realism.
Hmm.
There is no collective security. There is no multilateralism. There is
Hmm.
no collective security. And all of these words, when I'm saying them to you, sound so scholarly and academic and so distanced from reality. That is the new reality. Everything the world worked for is now very textbook.
But Dr.
With
Bukai,
complete disconnect with the real world.
Dr. Bukai, don't you think that when we talk about US estranging from international institutions and treaties, and the next moment we say that, everything that the world worked for the past 75 years, multilateralism, this international political system, is now in the danger of a collapse, probably. Isn't that giving too much power to the US? Because apparently we all believed that, this is a multilateral system and no one country should have the power to dictate. But then the same scholars give so much power to the US that if the US goes out, everything collapses. Don't you think we're sort of overrating the American presence in these institutions?
I don't know if we are overrating the American presence or American power, or the Americans just want to give up on global leadership.
Yeah.
That is the whole idea. So this was a unipolar world, right?
Hmm.
And we agreed that it's a unipolar world. We sort of got away with it, We were like, okay, so Israel is something US will always go out of its way to protect. It's the Zionist lobby in the US. There were books like the tail wags the dog and all of that. But essentially, it's now everywhere.
Yeah.
This withdrawal is from United Nations, from WTO, from climate treaties, from actually flipping sides and not supporting Europe and supporting Russia.
Hmm.
So if I say that the world to us scholars who like some predictability,
Hmm.
the world is that we're living in an upended world. And this is probably a very dangerous trend because let me finish this. There is a dilution of power,
Hmm.
the pools of power, right? And that maintains balance.
Hmm.
So the power is getting diluted at a pace and challenged at a pace. So what happened when he did what he did? You saw a Middle East coming up with an alternative plan for Gaza. You saw Europe literally, in hackles and shackles to do something to get together. Germany coming up with this plan to have its own military or increasing its military or committing soldiers to Zelensky. So what is happening? The reaction is that small units are now realizing, those who relied on the US are now trying to fend for themselves. This is giving rise to several poles. And at the risk of repeating myself, every time the world went multipolar, there were wars. So are we sitting at the edge of a third world war?
Hmm. Dr.
And I will have to also end this. I will take your question. When I take a class of undergrads, I say that the third world war, I don't know what the third world war will be fought with. but for the fourth one will be sticks and stones because the destruction would be so massive.
My last question was that don't you think that someone has to now, if Trump is, you know, estranging from these treaties, international organizations, do you think that there is capacity within other countries to really step up and replace the US and perhaps follow through with things like the Paris Climate Agreement or perhaps the WTO? Or you think that that capacity does not exist? If the US is not there, these agreements are not there anymore.
It's going to take a while.
Hmm.
It's going to take time, but then everything is going to get upended. So if you're looking at China emerging as a global leader, which I don't,
Hmm.
at best, it can be some bipolarity, at best. So even when the world was bipolar, one pole was always much more strong than than
Hmm.
the Soviet Union pole.
Hmm. Hmm.
When there was so-called bipolarity,
Hmm.
US was the superpower. And then there was unipolarity.
Hmm.
Are we going to move towards bipolarity? I don't think so. I think Chinese global supremacy will be resisted tooth and nail by Europe
Hmm.
and perhaps even by Russia. Russia is all for collaboration, but Russia under Putin sees itself getting back the glory it had.
Hmm. Revisionist goals.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Baqai, for joining. I think we've reached the end of the show. I learned a lot
Thank you
today,
so much for having me. I
and
don't
I'm
know if I
sure
gave you the answers you wanted to hear, but yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. It was very enlightening, and we would try to have more time from you in the future. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Asad. Lovely talking to you.
Same here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.